How's everyone doing today? We're back with the third modified practice FRQ, and this one deals with interest rates. So the question starts out, interest rates are important in explaining economic activity. Part A says, explain how an increase in the income level will affect the nominal interest rate in the short run. So, if there's an increase in the income level, the way this has to be viewed is as an increase in the demand for money. So again, in the original version of this question that would have required a graph, the graph would have been a money market graph, and the effect of an increase in income would have been depicted as an increase in the demand for money in the money market. The result of which would therefore then be an increase in the nominal interest rate. So that's the first part of the answer to part A. Again, the nominal interest rate increases due to an increase in the demand in the money market. Part B then says, explain how a decision by households to increase savings for retirement will affect real market interest rates in the short run. So again, in the original version of this question, when it was initially used, the graph that you would have had to make here would be the loanable funds market graph. And you may recall that there are three potential sources of loanable funds, the most important of which is domestic savings. So if you have an increase in any of those three, including an increase in domestic savings, that would be reflected as an increase in the supply of loanable funds, or a rightward shift in the supply curve in the loanable funds market. The result of that then would be a decrease in the real interest rate. So again, the answer here would be a decrease in real interest rates, and again, because it would be reflected as an increase in the supply of loanable funds. The last part of the question says, suppose that the nominal interest rate has been 6% with no expected inflation. So if there's no expected inflation, then the nominal interest rate will be the same as the real interest rate. In other words, if you're a lender and you're lending at 6% and you expect there to be no inflation, you'll also anticipate the same real return on your money. The real interest rate, the real return, with no interest would be the same as the nominal rate, 6%, 6%. So if inflation goes to, or expected inflation goes to 2%, determine the value of each of the following. The first being the new nominal interest rate. So again, from a lender's perspective, if they want to maintain that 6% real profit or real interest rate, then they need to account for inflation. They need to add in essentially what amounts to an inflation premium of 2% in this case. So the 6% real return plus the rate of interest would give you a new nominal interest rate of 8%. So real 6% plus inflation or expected inflation 2% gives you a new nominal rate of 8%. So again, that's the direct answer here. And then the final part says, what would be the new real interest rate? So again, if there's a 2% expected rate of inflation and you charge 8%, you have to subtract that inflation. You're essentially losing any profit that inflation would have eroded. So you're losing essentially a 2% of that return. So 8% nominal interest rate minus the 2% of expected inflation gives you a 6% real inflation rate. So again, part I, 8%, part II, 6% real return. All right, so that wraps up the third practice question on interest rates.